Okay, let's dive in. Welcome everyone to the deep dive.
Oh,
This is where we, take a whole stack of sources, articles, notes, research people share, and really try to pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge just for you. And today we're tackling what it takes to start or maybe grow a rental business. Specifically, that really tricky part. How do you pick the right stuff to actually rent out?
yeah, that's the core question. Our mission for this deep dive is pretty straightforward. We've got an article here, Keys to Smart Rental Inventory Investment, plus some related notes.
Right.
And we're aiming to cut through the noise. The goal is to help you understand the most critical factors you really, really need to think about before you invest your money in inventory.
Like a roadmap, sort of.
Exactly. Think of it as a shortcut to making smarter investment decisions, boosting your chances of, success.
Because, look, starting a rental business, it can be incredibly rewarding. I mean, having assets that just bring in income consistently, that's the dream, right?
It is.
But, and this is the crucial, but investing in the wrong items, that can turn that dream into, a resource drain pretty fast.
Oh, absolutely.
You could end up with stuff that loses value faster than you can rent it. Your cash gets tied up, and you're just not seeing the return you expected or need.
Exactly. And the article we're digging into really focuses on this. It lays out a core framework, basically a way to evaluate any potential rental item you're considering.
Okay.
And it really boils it down to 3 key factors. Get these right, and honestly, you're already way ahead of the curve.
3 factors. Got it. All right, let's hit the first one. So when you're thinking about buying something to rent out, the article says the first big thing is depreciation.
Right. Depreciation. Simply put, it's just how much value an asset loses over time.
Okay, makes sense. Things get old, worn out.
Yeah, wear and tear, maybe newer models come out, making the old ones obsolete, market changes, lots of reasons. But the vital part here is realizing that different things depreciate at wildly different speeds. And understanding that specific rate for whatever you're thinking of buying, that's fundamental.
Okay, so it's not just that it depreciates, but how fast.
Precisely.
And the reading gets interesting here because it uses some, kind of surprising examples. It starts with appreciating assets. Now, wait a minute. Appreciating. For rental stuff that gets used and banged up, that sounds wrong.
It does sound counterintuitive, I know. But yeah, it can happen, especially with items made from commodities, raw materials whose prices fluctuate.
Like what?
Scaffolding is the example given.
Yeah.
It's mostly steel, aluminum.
Right. Basic metals.
Yeah. And if the market price for steel or aluminum goes up over time, the actual value of your scaffolding, the physical asset, could increase, even while you're renting it out.
Whoa. Okay, so hang on. You're making money renting it, and the thing itself might be worth more later than when you bought it.
Potentially, yes.
So if someone's thinking about, a scaffolding rental side hustle, that completely changes the math on the return. It's not just getting your investment back.
Right. You might actually see the initial investment grow in value.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very different picture compared to most rental items that, usually just go down in value.
Which brings us neatly to the other side. Depreciating assets, especially the ones that lose value really, really quickly.
Mm-hmm. And the article points straight at technology. Uses Apple computers as a prime example.
Okay, yeah. People definitely want to rent those. They're popular, good quality.
No question about demand sometimes, but their value drops like a stone.
Oh, yeah. You feel that every time a new model gets announced, right? Suddenly, last year's perfectly good machine is worth significantly less.
Exactly. So if you invest in tech like computers, you are under pressure. You have to generate revenue fast.
Meaning lots of rentals, high prices.
Both, ideally.
Yeah.
Frequent rentals, high enough price point to recoup that initial cost before the value just tanks because of the next model or some new tech breakthrough.
That sounds stressful.
It can be. The risk is pretty significant, especially if you buy, say, a whole fleet of them.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't keep them rented out constantly, they're just sitting there, losing value every single day.
Okay, so fast depreciation. Big red flag, unless you are absolutely positively sure you have massive, consistent demand like right now.
Pretty much, yeah.
What about the other end of the spectrum? Things that seem to just last forever.
Yes. That's often the sweet spot for reliable long-term rental income. The article calls these long-lasting assets.
Okay.
And the example that really stood out was commercial-grade barbecues for a party rental business, specifically.
Right, like the big stainless steel ones you see at events.
Exactly. Now, think about a basic grill you might grab from, say, Lowe's or Home Depot for rentals. Constant use, moving them around. The article suggests they might only last maybe 24 months before they're just too beat up.
Yeah, they're not really built for that kind of heavy use and transport.
Not at all. But a commercial grade one, stainless steel, built tough. Yes, it's much more expensive up front, no doubt about it.
Significantly more, I bet.
Oh, yeah. But the article notes these things can last 25 years. Maybe even more. That's what it suggests. So yeah, the initial cost is higher, but that incredibly long lifespan means you could potentially generate revenue from that one barbecue for decades.
Okay, that totally reframes the cost. Investing more for something that earns for 25 years versus something that's basically disposable in 2, the long-term return looks completely different.
Dramatically different, absolutely.
Yeah.
So understanding how depreciation works for your potential assets, trying to find things that might rarely appreciate, or more realistically, things with a really long, useful rental life that's just fundamental. It's about making smart choices that pay off over years, not just weeks or months.
Makes sense. Okay, so factor 1. Keep a close eye on how fast value disappears. Depreciation. Got it. What's factor number 2?
Factor 2 is transactional costs.
Transactional costs. What does that mean exactly?
These are the expenses you run into every single time an item goes out on rent and comes back.
Okay. Not the purchase price.
No. This is the cost of getting it ready for the next person. Think cleaning, routine maintenance, checking it over, prepping it for delivery.
All the little things.
All the things that add up. And they vary hugely depending on the item.
Okay, but why do these matter so much? I mean, doesn't the rental fee just cover these costs?
Well, yes and no. They matter immensely because they directly bite into your profit margin on each rental.
I see.
The lower your transactional costs for a particular item, the more of that rental fee is actual profit in your pocket.
Okay, examples help here. The reading mentions things with low transactional costs, like tables and chairs.
Exactly. Tables and chairs. They're staples in the event rental industry, partly for this reason. Think about it.
Right.
What's the upkeep after a rental?
Wipe them down, stack them up.
Pretty much. Quick wipe down, maybe check for damage, stack them. Usually that's it. Super minimal effort per rental cycle.
So once you've rented out that table enough times to cover what you paid for it, the ongoing cost each time you rent it again is incredibly low. Maybe just getting it there and back.
Precisely. Depreciation is slow. Transactional cost per rental is tiny. Once it's paid off, almost all the revenue from that table or chair just flows through as profit. That efficiency makes them fantastic rental items.
Okay, got it. Now contrast that with things that have high transactional costs. The article uses, wine glasses and chair covers.
Yes, classic examples. Because this is where the real work happens after the item comes back from a rental.
Right.
Wine glasses. Every single time. They need meticulous washing, drying, polishing, careful inspection for chips, cracks.
Ugh, sounds tedious.
It is. And chair covers. They need laundering, ironing, folding or storing carefully so they don't get wrinkled again. That's significant labor involved every single rental.
Yeah, the wine glass example in the notes was really clear. Like you might buy a glass for maybe, $1, $1.50?
Something like that.
And rent it for, say, 40 or 60 cents. That sounds okay. Until you realize how much time and effort labor costs goes into cleaning and checking each glass, plus replacing the broken ones, it eats up a huge chunk of that 60 cents.
A huge chunk. And the same logic applies directly to chair covers. They might seem cheap to buy one by one, but the cumulative cost and effort to wash, press, and prep them for every single event, it adds up very, very quickly.
The reading also lumps more complex stuff in here like bobcats or heavy machinery. They obviously rent for a lot more money.
Oh, much higher rates, absolutely.
Yeah.
But think about the work before each rental.
Right. Got to make sure it's safe, working properly.
Exactly. Extensive pre-delivery checks, safety inspections, plus they need regular, often quite expensive, scheduled maintenance to keep them running reliably. These aren't just occasional costs. They're baked into the operating cost for every rental cycle.
Okay, so it really is this critical balancing act. Things with low transactional costs can be priced lower and still make good money because there's barely any effort per rental. But things with high transactional costs have to command higher rental fees. That price needs to cover not just the item's cost over time, but also all that recurring labor and expense every single time it goes out.
You've got it. Understanding these recurring costs is absolutely vital. You can't just look at the sticker price when you buy. You have to think about the true cost of owning and renting that thing out, rental after rental, over its whole life.
That's a really powerful point. Okay, 2 factors down. We've got depreciation and transactional costs. Time for number 3, demand and utilization rate.
Yes, and these two are, you could argue, may be the most crucial.
Really, more than the others.
Well, think about it. Demand is how often customers actually want the item. Utilization rate is how often you manage to actually rent it out when it's available. These directly determine how often your inventory is making money.
Ah, okay.
If nobody wants it, or you can't get it rented, even if they do, then the depreciation rate and transactional costs, well, they almost don't matter because the item isn't generating any revenue.
Right. So something could look great on paper, last forever, easy to clean, but if it just sits in your storage unit gathering dust.
It's a terrible investment. Simple as that.
Okay. So examples of high utilization items. The article goes back to construction equipment.
Yeah, it revisits things like bobcats and scaffolding. Now, demand might fluctuate, seasonally or depending on how the local construction market is doing.
Sure, building booms and busts.
Right. But often there's a pretty steady underlying need for that kind of equipment in many areas.
And we already talked about their lifespan potentially really long, like 20, 30 years for something like a bobcat.
Exactly. So if you can build up a solid customer base, keep that equipment working regularly, it can be a source of consistent, quite substantial income for many, many years.
The article mentioned leasing a bobcat.
Yeah, it uses that as an example. If you have strong local demand, the rental income could easily cover your, say, low monthly lease payments. And then long after that lease is paid off, the machine is still yours, still potentially generating significant revenue.
So the main effort there shifts towards sales, marketing, building those relationships to keep it rented.
100%. It's about ensuring utilization. Now, flip that. Think about low utilization items.
Let me guess. Back to technology.
You got it. Back to electronics and tech items.
Ah, the double whammy we talked about.
Depreciates fast.
Yeah.
It might just sit there.
It's a really risky combination. If demand isn't consistently high, these items are idle. They're losing value quickly, like we said, and bringing in $0 while they do it.
Yikes.
Yeah. The article really hammers this point. For these kinds of fast appreciating items, you must assess the local market demand before you even think about buying.
So renting out Apple computers might work great in one town, but be a total flop somewhere else.
Absolutely. It might only be profitable if you have confirmed high demand right there in your specific area. Maybe local businesses need them for projects or schools or design agencies, whatever it is. But if that specific local demand isn't there, fast appreciation plus low utilization equals a potentially very, very poor investment. Okay, this just screams the need for market research. You can't just buy stuff you think people might want.
You absolutely cannot guess. You need to dig in. Understand your specific target customers. What do they need? Are there seasonal peaks and troughs? What are your competitors already renting out? Where are the gaps you could fill?
Find the unmet needs.
Exactly. It's all about making sure you invest in things that people demonstrably want and that you can actually rent out frequently enough.
The article had a good tip on this too, right? About starting small.
Yeah, really practical advice. Maybe just buy one or two of an item you're considering. Test the waters. See if it actually rents in your area. Measure the real utilization rate before you commit to buying 10 or 20 of them.
Dip your toe in, basically. See if the water's warm before jumping in.
That's a good way to put it. So, bringing these three threads together, the framework from the article is really clear. Evaluating depreciation, transactional costs, and demand utilization rate. Looking at all three together is absolutely crucial if you want to make informed, profitable investment decisions for a rental business.
They're all connected.
Totally interconnected. You ignore one of those legs of the stool, and the whole thing can easily fall over.
So whether you're just thinking about a small side hustle, renting out a few specific things, or maybe you have ambitions to build a really big rental company.
Doesn't matter the scale.
These three principles, depreciation, transactional costs, demand, they seem pretty foundational.
Yeah.
Understanding how fast it loses value, what it costs you every time it goes out and comes back, and critically, how often people actually want it. That's the core of investing smartly in your inventory.
It really helps simplify what can feel like a very complex decision, doesn't it? It gives you this clear lens to look through when you're evaluating potential buys. Takes you beyond just the initial price tag or, thinking something seems popular.
Yeah, definitely gives you a solid framework. Okay, so that wraps up our deep dive into smart rental inventory investment based on that article and the notes we had. We've covered everything from scaffolding and tech to barbecues, tables, chairs, glasses, even heavy equipment.
A good rate.
Now, here's something maybe for you, the listener, to think about kind of taking this framework and running with it yourself. Think about other things you see around, maybe stuff you've rented before, or things you see others renting. How would those items stack up against this three-factor test? depreciation, transactional costs, and demand.
Yeah, which ones start to look like potential winners using this lens?
And which ones maybe seem like investments you'd want to steer clear of. Just something to mull over as you look around for your own potential rental business opportunities.